Some of them didn't even bother hiding it, the smirks, the snide comments, the eye rolls. To them, she was just some woman in an old uniform, dragging in a plain-looking German shepherd while everyone else had ribbons, sparkles, and show dogs with polished fur. She didn't speak. Didn't smile. Just stood there, boots dusty, shoulders back, silent. No one knew she was a combat veteran. No one knew her dog had been trained to sniff out explosives, track enemy positions, and protect lives under fire. And when she gave that single, quiet hand signal, the entire room forgot how to breathe. Bright lights, polished floors, a sea of colors, glitter, and perfume. The dog showcase was less about dogs, and more about presentation. Fancy collars, hand-stitched outfits, owners dressed to impress, walking their pets like runway models. Some dogs had their own grooming teams. Others had social media pages bigger than most people's. It wasn't a place for outsiders. It was all about who had the best breed, the flashiest tricks, the smoothest coat. You could feel the tension in the air, not from the dogs, but from the people. Everyone was watching everyone. Measuring. Judging. Then, she walked in. No glitter. No makeup. No fanfare. Just a worn military jacket, faded jeans, and boots that had clearly seen better days. Her dog. A large, calm German shepherd. No frills. No bows. Just quiet strength. Heads turned, not in admiration, but confusion. Who was this woman? Why was she even here? She didn't fit. Not even close. She wasn't there to compete. Not in the way they understood. But they didn't know that yet. She didn't say a thing. Not when the woman near the judge's table whispered, "Is she lost?" Not when someone chuckled and said, "That dog looks like it belongs in a police lineup, not a showcase." She just kept walking. Slow. Calm. Focused. There was something different about the way she carried herself. Not proud, not flashy, but grounded. Like someone who'd seen more than she let on. Like someone who didn't need to be seen. She didn't walk her dog. They walked together. Step for step. No leash tugging. No distractions. Just perfect, quiet coordination. Her eyes scanned the room, but not nervously. More like someone checking exits, watching shadows, reading people. You could tell, without even knowing her story, this woman had been through something. What the crowd didn't see was the years she spent in combat. The missions. The dust. The fear. The bond she built with the dog walking beside her, not in parks or backyards, but in places where every step could be the last. He wasn't a pet. He was her partner. Her lifeline. Her shield. But in this room, none of that mattered. Because all they saw was a woman who didn't look the part, and a dog who didn't shine like the rest. And that was their first mistake. The snickering started before she even reached her spot. One man, standing next to a poodle with painted nails, leaned over to his friend and said loud enough for her to hear, "Did someone forget the costume parties next door?" His friend laughed. Maybe she thought this was a military recruitment booth. Bless her heart. A few people near the judge's table chuckled. Not even trying to be subtle anymore. The veteran didn't flinch. She just kept her eyes ahead, hand resting lightly near her dog's shoulder. He didn't bark, didn't growl. Just stood beside her, still, watchful, like he was waiting for her next move. But the real sting came from the judges. They didn't even look up properly when her name was called. One of them sighed audibly. Another flipped through their scorecard with an expression that said, "Let's just get this over with." Someone in the audience muttered, "Well, this'll be quick." And that was it. That's how they saw her, as a placeholder. An interruption between the real performers. They didn't care who she was. What she'd done. What she carried in her silence. To them, she was just the odd one out. She didn't have the right clothes. She didn't smile for the cameras. She didn't parade her dog like a trophy. And in a room full of people chasing praise, she dared to stand with quiet dignity. But humiliation doesn't always come from words. Sometimes, it's the way people look through you, like you don't belong. And yet, she said nothing. Not a single word in her defense. She didn't explain who she was or why she was there. Because she knew something they didn't. And she was waiting for just the right moment to show it. Before this day, before the spotlight, before the judgmental stares in some polished arena. She was somewhere very different. She was in the desert. In the heat. In a world where silence could save your life, and one wrong step could end it. She didn't grow up dreaming of medals or uniforms. But when the time came, she stepped up. Joined the military. Trained harder than most. Earned her respect, not with words, but with grit. And beside her, every step of the way, was him. The same German shepherd standing beside her now. He wasn't bred to win ribbons. He was trained to find IEDs buried in sand. To track enemies across miles of wilderness. To protect her, not just in theory, but in the chaos of real war. There was one mission she never talks about. The one that nearly ended everything. They were ambushed. She took shrapnel to the leg, went down hard. And when the dust settled, she wasn't sure if she'd make it out alive. But her dog, that dog, didn't run. Didn't panic. He shielded her with his own body, barking, alerting the unit, refusing to move until help arrived. He saved her life. More than once. After she was medically discharged, she could have left it all behind. The trauma. The pain. The war. But not him. He wasn't just a reminder of the battlefield. He was the reason she was still here. And they stayed together. Quiet. Healing. While the world moved on, not knowing what either of them had been through. Until today. Today, she brought him into a world that didn't know, and didn't care, about the past they shared. But they were about to. Her name was called again. This time, sharper. Impatient. She stepped forward, slow and steady. No nerves. No flash. Just focus. The other dogs had twirled. Jumped through hoops. Walked backward on two legs. Tricks for claps. Tricks for cameras. But she didn't reach for any props. Didn't pull out a toy or treat. She simply looked down at her dog. He looked up. The room grew quiet, not out of respect, but confusion. One of the judges whispered, "Is she going to do anything?" She stood still. One hand behind her back, the other near her side. And then, she moved just 2 fingers. A motion so small, it was almost invisible. And suddenly, the air changed. Her dog's entire posture shifted in an instant. His ears perked. His stance tightened. His body went from relaxed to mission ready. You could feel it. He wasn't just performing now, he was executing. In total silence, he began a series of actions that weren't meant for applause, they were meant for survival. He moved in perfect patterns, scanning the room as if clearing a building. He circled her once, paused, then dropped into a silent alert position, eyes locked on a fixed point ahead. Another subtle signal, a slight nod, and he pivoted into a protective stance at her side, watching her 6. The crowd didn't know what they were seeing. This wasn't a trick. This was training. Combat-level coordination. Reflexes sharpened by real danger. And suddenly, No one was laughing. Phones slowly started to come out, but no one dared speak. Every step the dog took, calm, measured, precise, felt like it carried a weight none of them could understand. All eyes were on her now. And she hadn't said a word. What they thought was going to be an awkward few seconds of nothing turned into something they'd never forget. Her German Shepherd was no longer just a plain dog. He moved like a soldier. Not wild, not excited, but controlled. Trained. Dead serious. She gave another small signal, barely a shift of her shoulder, and instantly, he went from still to sprinting. But not just running for the sake of it. He was scanning corners. Pausing. Dropping. Looking back to her for the next move. It was like watching a tactical unit in motion. The judges leaned forward, confused, then captivated. One even lowered their pen. They'd seen 1,000 tricks, 1,000 performances. But this wasn't entertainment. This was something else. Then, with another hand signal, he returned. Fast. Controlled. Sat at her side, eyes on her face. And for the first time since she walked in, the room was silent. But it wasn't mocking anymore. It was stunned. People had forgotten the shiny coats, the polished nails, the matching outfits. They were watching discipline, trust, years of training. They were watching a bond forged in fire. And all it took was 3 silent signals. No treats. No praise. No theatrics. Just mutual respect between a handler and her dog, the kind that only comes from going through hell together. The same woman they laughed at 10 minutes ago now stood taller than anyone in the room. And she didn't smile. Didn't gloat. She just placed a gentle hand on her dog's head and waited for the judges to say something, anything. They couldn't. Because for once, words weren't enough. It started slow. A quiet shuffle. Someone in the back lowered their phone, eyes wide. Then, a single clap. Just one. And then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire room that had once snickered and whispered, was on its feet. Applauding. Not the polite, forced kind. Not the golf clap you give just to be nice. This was real. Raw. Earned. Even the judges, the same ones who barely looked up before, now stared like they'd just witnessed something sacred. One of them stood. Hand over their chest. Silent. Eyes glassy. Another gave a small nod, the kind of nod that says, I was wrong. And as for the ones who had laughed, they weren't saying much anymore. Some looked down. Others tried to hide behind their sunglasses or phones. A few just stood frozen, watching her like they were seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. But she didn't soak it in. She didn't raise her hands in victory. Didn't wink. Didn't bow. She gave her dog one final command, and he calmly stood, walked beside her, and followed her out of the spotlight. No strut. No drama. Just 2 soldiers leaving the field. The applause kept going long after they'd gone. As they walked out of the spotlight, the applause still echoed in the hall. But she didn't look back. She didn't need to. The victory wasn't in the applause. It was never about that. It was in the respect. The acknowledgement. The recognition of something deeper. She didn't have to prove anything to anyone. Not the judges. Not the crowd. Not the people who had mocked her earlier. She had already won. In her silence, in her calm, she had shown the world what truly mattered. What real strength looks like. It's not in the flash. The show. The artificial glamour. True strength is in quiet resilience. In the ability to stand your ground when the world expects you to fall. She wasn't there for validation. She wasn't there to impress. She was there because she and her dog had a bond that no one could ever take away. A bond forged in war, trust, and survival. And that was far more powerful than anything this world of glitter and ribbons could offer. As they left, her dog walking beside her, the world outside the spotlight felt like a different place. Calm. Familiar. Just them. And that was all that mattered. She didn't need to say a word. Her strength, their strength, was felt in that one quiet moment. The world had finally seen her for what she truly was. Not just a woman in boots, but a warrior. And a hero. We all tend to judge too quickly, don't we? We look at someone's clothes, their appearance, their outward behavior, and we think we know who they are. We measure them by the surface, by what they seem to be, not by what's beneath. But strength isn't always loud. It isn't always flashy. It isn't always the one who grabs the spotlight first. Sometimes, the strongest people are the quiet ones. The ones who fought battles we'll never understand. The ones who don't need to prove their worth to anyone. Sometimes, the most powerful stories aren't the ones told with words, but the ones told with actions. With heart. With silence. She didn't need the applause. She didn't need the validation. Her bond with her dog was enough. And in the end, that was what won. So the next time you're quick to judge someone, remember this story. Look beyond the surface. Because sometimes, the quietest ones are the ones with the greatest strength. And we all have a little more to learn from them than we realize.